Hi, this is Jackie's Reading Room, and I'm your host, Jackie P. Have you turned some pages today? The French word noir means black, but English speaking people pronounce it noir. When it comes to noir fiction, it means darkness or of the night, because noir is actually a category of modern crime fiction. And I'd like to talk to you about that today. There's a lot to say, obviously, and it's a genre that I particularly appreciate, and I'm not the only one out there, I'm certain. Um, but we're going to try to keep it short and sweet as usual. So, noir fiction is basically fiction of crime and detection. A quote that I found is it usually takes place in a grim urban setting, and there's a feeling of disillusionment, pessimism, and despair in these types of works. You can think of all kinds of categories: mystery, suspense, murder, investigation, usually when there's a detective. And I'm sure right now you're thinking of famous literary detectives that you've met in your readings. Of course, we are talking about criminals, serial murders, missing persons is a topic that comes back often in that type of fiction. And you also may think of thrillers. And of course, in the thriller category, you have a lot of different types of thrillers. I can give you an example of legal thrillers, right? And one of the best examples that I can give you is John Grisham's very large body of work, most of which take place in a courtroom. And of course, you also have nonfiction that tackles that with true crime. And I find that true crime is possibly even more disturbing because it's actually true. And some of these stories are very gruesome. But for me, one of my, I guess, most recent true crime, I believe it's possibly the only one I've read. Um, Basically, I was so impressed with the research that went through it. The book was called The Flowers of the Killing Moon. I will put that in the description. And I could not believe the amount of work that was put in to actually write this book. Very detailed and disturbing, to say the least. And I read this at the end of last year, at a time when it was almost Christmas time, and everybody is kind of looking forward to some time off. So it was interesting to read it at that time of year. But as far as I'm concerned, there's no real time to read about crime or detective stories. I personally enjoy reading them at any moment of the year. Did you know that the first detective story is um, uh, a very famous one, and it's called "The Murders in the Rue Morgue" by none other than Edgar Allan Poe? You may have heard of this famous writer, and it goes way back to 1841. And the detective was called C. Auguste Dupin. And basically, you could possibly find this easily at your local library or your local bookstore. I would say the library is possibly a better bet because it's not very recent. But detective stories have existed for a long while. Um, as I mentioned, I love to read a good detective story. I love suspense thrillers. Usually in these books, the chapters are short, and every time you finish a chapter, you think, "Uh-oh, what's going to happen next?" And you can barely stop and wait. So be ready for intense reading sessions. And I usually love to ask myself, okay, what happened who committed the crime. And I think one of the most interesting questions is why? Because some of these, you know, characters in this genre have some very twisted reasons often to commit the crimes that they commit. So it's super interesting to uh, as you go along and you're reading to try to determine who did what, when, where, how, you know, all that, all these essential questions. I want to give you a few examples of books that I've read recently that I enjoyed, and I also have two great websites if ever you're looking for more ideas, suggestions on some titles that you could read. I find that these are, you know, fast reads for the beach, for the cottage, whether it's summer, winter, spring, summer. I said that before. So, at any moment of the year. The first book I want to talk to you about is called I'll Never Tell, and it was written in 2019 by Catherine McKenzie. She's a Montreal based lawyer, so I'm really happy to uh, tell you about a Canadian writer. And the story takes place in a summer camp. Now, if you think summer camp, usually you don't think noir, but it's actually a very interesting setting for a story to happen. Um, and um, and the story is kind of told in back and forth points of view, and I it kept me guessing till the end, because at some point I thought, well, maybe this is what happened. Well, I'm not sure. Maybe this is what happened. So very tense. Catherine McKinsey writes some very good thrillers and suspense novels, and she has some very interesting male, but especially I would say female characters. So if I had to say something about that. The other one is also by a Canadian writer, Robert Rottenberg, and the book was published in 2021, and it's called Downfall. And what I liked about that book, one of the things I liked, was that it takes place in Toronto, and it deals with a topic that we are confronted with if we live in a big town, which is homelessness, but we don't read about it very much in fiction, or if we do, it's briefly. To be honest, I don't remember reading about homelessness like often in the books I've read. And I lived in Toronto myself, so it was really cool to imagine myself in that story in Toronto, a city that I know quite well. But also, it was a bit disturbing because, well, because I live there, and the unfortunately the homelessness issue has increased in the last few years, and there are some. Yeah, some I'm thinking of some of the characters and the different stories, parent children relationship that I thought were very well done. So I'm going to read more by Mr. Rottenberg, who is from Toronto. But one thing I need to mention here is that some of the best noir fiction, according to me, I guess, or maybe the one that I prefer, or that I'm always attracted to, is Scandinavia, is from Scandinavia and Iceland. So Nordic noir, if you want a name for it. I've read a few over the years. I have a few authors that I follow on Twitter, on Facebook. And one of the last ones I read was called The Corpse Flower. It's written by Anne Mette Hancock. She's a Danish writer. And the book came out in 2017, but the English translation a few years later in 2021. And the story is about this journalist who starts investigating some situation with the police, and it takes place in Copenhagen, a city that I visited a few years back and that I loved. So once again, I find that the setting really influences me in my readings, not just when I read noir, but I would say overall. So very cleverly done, this novel, and the chase around, I guess, Europe, and the partnership between a journalist and a police officer who each have their own angle, if you may, to try to investigate what happened. And it was a murder that happened a long time before, and then new evidence comes up. So you should look into it. If you're looking for other titles, I've given you three, but there are so many more. There are two websites that I found not so long ago that actually have really interesting information and reviews of noir titles. So the first website is a blog, and it's called crimebythebook.com, and it's full of book reviews on crime fiction. And it was started by a blogger named Abby. She works in publishing, and she says that she's been a fan of crime fiction since she read Nancy Drew as a child. And when I read that, I thought, hey, me too. So I guess my love for detective stories goes way back. I used to love, I've always enjoyed those types of stories. And she has a lot of different categories on her website for you to um, uh, read, pick up your next read. And she doesn't just focus on Scandinavian titles, although that is what started her as I believe, as a blogger. So when she read Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, when it came out in the US, she was hooked. And so she has a lot of information on all kinds of crime fiction writers. And there's a community as well that I'd like to tell you about. It's called novelsuspects.com. And I quote, it says that it's a community of mystery and thriller fans who love to share our favorite books, movies, TV shows, and podcasts. But they actually mention we, especially books, right? If you can search by tag, different aspects of the genre. There's different book lists. So listen, there's a lot here for just about everyone. I also saw that there's a newsletter from Penguin Random House that actually featured the most anticipated mysteries and thrillers of summer 2022. And since this is what's going on right now, this is where I'm at, summer of 2022. I'll give you the link for that. And on my TBR pile, if ever you're wondering, there's always one or two or three thrillers or mysteries lying around. But in the next couple of weeks and months, I'm hoping that I can get to Ruth Ware's The Lying Game. I have not read anything by her so far, and I'd like to um, find out more about her style. And a new book called The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. I would like to find out. The cover of that book is just beautiful, and I'm very much attracted to covers, not just when it comes to crime fiction, but for books in general. Hopefully, this has inspired you to pick up a crime fiction or a suspense or maybe a legal thriller in the next week or so. And so until then, I hope that you keep turning some pages. Take care. See you soon.